My name's Lauren. I'm from Northern Ireland originally. I'm 41 years old. I'm the founder of We Love Lucid, which is one of the world's first alcohol-free travel companies. I'm also a single mom to a very energetic 4-year-old girl, and I'm a writer, an aspiring writer as well.
So, what were you like when you were younger? Were you outdoorsy? Were you adventurous? Were you an only child? What were your early years like?
Yeah, it's funny you ask that question because, whenever you have a child and you get to see them and it kind of reminds you about things about yourself when you were younger. But yeah, I was always very creative, into arty things, making things, loved animals. I grew up in a different era, where let's just say children were maybe perhaps a little more curtailed in their behavior and maybe weren't able to express themselves fully as the real people that they were. So sometimes it's a little bit hard to say, but I wouldn't have said I was somebody who was like swinging from the chandeliers, or I was a little bit reserved, actually, a little bit quiet, a little bit introverted, but I loved running about outside. I loved going about on my bike, and I grew up in the countryside, which was just brilliant. So yeah, that's what I remember. I was always into sports, I played hockey and things like that.
Where did your love of travel come from?
My love of travel, looking back, I honestly think it began when I started learning Spanish in school. I had this, I was about 13 years old. I had this brilliant Spanish teacher, and her her passion for Spain and all things Spanish really rubbed off on me. And I remember thinking, wow, I can't wait to go to this mystical place called Spain. And it turned out that I also had a knack for languages. I picked languages up quickly, specifically being able to reproduce sounds and have a good accent. And so this really kind of moved me down that path. I remember I found this diary entry recently, when I was about 15, and on it said, I want to be completely fluent in Spanish and French by the time I'm 18, and I want to live in Spain and nobody's going to stop me. And all this is kind of stuff. I did turn out to become fluent in Spanish and French, and I have lived in Spain, although not permanently now. I'm not living there anymore. But yeah, so it was really starting to learn Spanish. And when I went there, I was 16. I went on this trip to like it was a sports camp my parents sent me to. I obviously wanted to go to it as well, and a family exchange with a Spanish family, and it really opened my eyes to this kind of sense of adventure that was innate in me. And I remember getting on a bus one evening, and we were traveling. I was traveling on my own at that point from Madrid to some place 3 hours down the road, and I just remember that kind of feeling, that exhilarating feeling of being on the road and going from one place to the next and not having anything on the agenda. And there was a beautiful sunset at the time out the side of the bus, and I was listening to Moby, the album, play, and I still love that album. It reminds me of that time. But that was what really sparked that for me, that love of travel and adventure, and just not knowing what's around the next corner.
How did that progress for you? Because after I'd sort of finished my A levels, I was very fortunate. I worked for 6 months and then went backpacking around Southeast Asia and went over to Australia and New Zealand before heading over to America to do Camp America before starting university. Did you do something similar, or what happened after your A levels?
Yeah, so A levels were a slog for me, mainly because I was being told what to do constantly by people, teachers, parents. And I was, not quite 18, but I was an adult. And, it's that stage where you're an adult, but you're still getting told what to do. And I personally just couldn't wait to get out of there. And I was quite confident about traveling. And having done that when I was 15 or 16, I was confident about heading off somewhere on my own. So I got, at that time, my parents helped me organize this volunteering experience in South America, and it was through a church. And that's what I was going to do for a year. Unfortunately, it didn't pan out the way I thought. And the relationship with the church broke down, not because of anything sinister or anything really that I did, just because I wasn't really interested in that side of things, of doing all the churchy side of things. I was moving away from that personally in my life. And anyway, they basically said, right, we don't want you here. It's time for you to go home. And I didn't want to go home. I stayed in South America. I met a bunch of mainly guys, young guys who used to just hang about, this residential area where I was staying, and that's where I started to get into drugs over there. And at the time, I thought I was just having the time of my life. It was freedom, freedom is what ultimately what I wanted. And it was coke that I was taking over there. You could get cocaine for a really, really low price. And quite a lot of it. And so I really took to that, as somebody who was quite introverted. I loved the feeling. I loved this kind of high that it gave me. And I wasn't so self-conscious anymore, and I could be outgoing and chatty. Wow, really, really chatty. So yeah, that was actually the beginning of my journey. I smoked weed and stuff like that in high school as well. But that was the beginning of my journey down that kind of self-destructive path, you could say. I was 18 at the time, and I have very fond memories looking back to Argentina as well. It really, because it was a formative time of my life. The music, the food, just it's very emotional sometimes when I think back about it. But yeah, that it also was the start of my journey with more serious journey with alcohol and drugs.
What happened when did you go back to the UK after your year away and go to university, or did you take a different route?
Yeah, so I'd already applied to go to university because I became fluent in Spanish after my trip when I was 15 and 16. So I got accepted to university without having to go through the usual process. It was a degree in interpreting and translating Spanish and French. And yeah, I went back home, and early, 6 months into my planned 1 year trip to Argentina, and then I took off to Barcelona for another 6 months, where I kind of bummed around. I was a little homeless actually for part of that time. I lived in a tent with my Spanish boyfriend who sold small amounts of hash and got into all sorts of mischief. I was working in a pizza restaurant at the time, and just getting ripped off by the owner. He's paying something like €3 an hour. Keep in mind, this is back in 2022. But after that, I went to university, yes. And let's just say there was not a lot of studying that went on during that time. I managed to get a degree, a second class degree, and with really minimal work whatsoever. My focus was on partying, and as a student, that's just wow. I really took to that. Really good times I actually had, but again, it was just taking me further down that path of like, yeah, just yeah, what is self destruction, and just not giving a damn.
When did things change for you? Because, you founded We Love Lucid.com. I suppose, what changed for you in order
Mm,
wanting to stop sort of the drinking and the drugs?
yeah. Well, I continued to do what I did in Argentina and various other different countries for right up until I was around 32. I'd come back to the UK, save up a bit of money, then head off for a prolonged adventure somewhere. In my eyes, I was, really exploring because I had that part inside me, that wanted to explore, but it was a different kind of exploration. Let's just say, and so I did the same thing in South Africa. It was. Gradually getting worse. You can imagine young 20-year-old like partying around Cape Town, for example, and not really taking that many precautions when it comes to alcohol and drugs. And so I was getting myself in more and more trouble. And eventually I decided to go to South Korea. I was just 30, just after turning 30 at the time. And South Korea wasn't my usual kind of destination. It was kind of safe. Koreans were, for the most part, well behaved. And you couldn't really get recreational drugs there very easily. And so at first I thought, wow, this just sounds total crap. But anyway, I ended up going because I realized, I could work there as an English teacher, and I might turn out quite well, and I might really enjoy it. And it turned out that in Korea, I had both the worst and the best moments of my life, because that's where you could say, hit a rock bottom and decided to stop drinking. And I haven't drunk since. So, probably not go into too much detail about rock bottoms, which are very personal things, but, it has a kind of a funny side mind to it as well. Let's just say I got caught up in not so great circles and got into a lot of trouble, and there's a lot of fear there. So to be honest with you, the reason why I stopped drinking was fear that I could end up getting losing my life because of the trouble that I was getting into and the kinds of people that I was with, but also physically. I remember I went out one night and I was partying with this group of Chinese dwarfs. It's a true story. And this one guy had this in China they have this contraband liquor. Everybody thinks, I don't think people are aware of the Chinese ability to drink really strong liquor, but they have this stuff that's illegal in most countries. And this guy he gave me some of that and I tried it. And I just remember at the time thinking how, wow, this is, doing me harm. It's so strong. And the next day I felt so awful and I was having all these symptoms and I self-diagnosed myself with the onset of pancreatitis, which is something that people get when they drink too much. And it's a serious thing. And so again, out of fear, I really just said, I felt like I had no choice. It was really just, okay, I try to stop this now or things are going to turn out really, really badly for me. Especially, I wasn't taking the recreational drugs when I was in South Korea. So the drinking really escalated, which was a blessing in a way because I could really, really see how bad these kind of behaviors had gotten.
So what support did you get for stopping and, choosing a life of sobriety? Yeah, I suppose, was it friends and family? Was it just you going completely cold turkey? What did that look like?
So I was very alone in this part of the journey. And sometimes I really wonder how on earth I managed to do it. I wasn't drinking at this stage. I was drinking probably about 4 nights a week. Okay. So it wasn't a daily thing. So for me, I didn't have this kind of severe physical withdrawal. I'm sure I did have a physical withdrawal of some sorts, but not a severe physical withdrawal that some people need to be monitored on. That wasn't the case. For me, the hardest part was, when the alcohol was out of the way, you're faced with a situation where you don't actually know who you really are. In my mind, I was this party girl who just didn't give a shit. And, I just did what I wanted. I could drink more than anybody else and take a pile of drugs and stay up for days. And when you take all that away, I was faced with trying to piece together, well, who is Lauren then? And all the emotions and difficult emotions and the guilt and the shame and this kind of crippling feeling of worthlessness surrounding that all. And it was just such a kind of, yeah, I just felt so vulnerable at that time. And I met a guy, it's funny, and it was the night that I actually decided to quit drinking. I met somebody on a bus. I was about to take a trip to the Sea of Japan, this island in the Sea of Japan. It was a group trip. It was one of these more wholesome things that I've been trying to do. And a guy sat down beside me and I was thinking, oh God, it couldn't be arsed. Like, bus journeys in Korea are really long, despite the fact it's a small country. It's because there's so much traffic. I'm going to have to sit beside this guy for 6 hours now, and I'm probably going to have to talk. It turned out that the guy was Korean. I'd spent a lot of time living in the States, and he was sober, which is a very rare thing to find in Korea among the expats or even among native Koreans. It's a kind of place where you have to become a chronic alcoholic, usually over 50, before you consider sobriety. The way it probably was in the UK, maybe 40 years ago or something like that, even 30 or 20. So we became friends, and Sam was a real big support. Sam is his English name given by him. He's got a Korean name. Sam was a really big support to me. I went to AA with him once, but decided that particular group wasn't probably right for me because it was just a bunch of older guys there, and I really just wanted to connect with other girls. I remember thinking, where are the other 32-year-olds that have quit drinking? I literally felt I was the only one doing that in the whole planet. I remember looking online and there was a few blogs and things about back then, but there was no huge sober movement like there was now. So, ultimately it was creating We Love Lucid, the alcohol-free travel company that I created that helped me stay plugged into the sober community. And without that, probably would have been very difficult.
on your website, welovelucid.com, one of the things that it says that you share on there is you sort out vast empty spaces, spending time in Mongolia and Siberia. And I'd love to hear more about those trips and how I suppose they helped you either come to terms with things or heal things inside, or just giving you that freedom to sort of be yourself in those vast empty spaces.
Oh yeah. Well, if you know anything about East Asia, you'll know that it's packed full of people and there's not that many empty spaces. So after living in Korea for almost 3 years, I really did crave empty spaces, places where there's hardly any people. And I knew for me, I was about to embark on this journey. Basically, before heading back to the UK, I wanted to do this trip to a bunch of places that have always been on my list. And you mentioned Mongolia there. So I grew up with horses, riding horses. I forgot to mention that actually at the beginning. And it's something that fell by the wayside with my drinking and just whatever. It fell by the wayside. And so one of my dreams was always to ride, gallop across the Mongolian steppe, Mongolian grasslands on horseback. And so I planned this as part of my trip. And I knew it was going to be a kind of self-discovery, this trip, but I didn't want to put too much pressure on myself. I was trying to work out what my next steps were. I didn't want to live in the UK particularly, but where would I live? What would I do? I wanted to be self-employed, but I didn't want to be teaching I didn't want to be teaching in a school the way I had been before. And so there were lots of kind of questions that I hope to get some answers for on this trip. And so yes, I went to Mongolia, which was an eye opener. It's funny, people always think if you're somewhere like the Mongolian steppe that you'll be blissed out and on cloud nine. And it's funny because your issues kind of come with you, whether you're on the bloody Mongolian steppe or if you're just walking down the street in your hometown. And triggers there. I remember on that particular trip, it was a very budget trip, which I organized through the couch surfing platform. And the host was, oh goodness, I really struggled with her. I kind of felt like I was back in secondary school with the bullying dynamic. She was obviously yeah, that's what happened basically. And so it was a real struggle. And I always kind of laugh looking back, thinking, these, whether you're on the Mongolian steppe or elsewhere, you still get triggered and you still have to deal with your stuff. Don't get me wrong; it was absolutely beautiful. The stars and staying with Mongolian nomads and galloping across the steppe on the horse. I got thrown off the horse as well, and I wasn't wearing a helmet, and so I met some amazing people. But like most experiences, it's not about either being a really good one or a really bad one. It's both. It's always both. Like I'm currently disputing with a campsite because a dog bit my daughter's hand the other day. But at the same time, the owner's dog, but at the same time, that was a really beautiful experience we had at the campsite. And so, yeah, this is a learning experience because life is like that. It's not either good or bad. It's a mixture of everything.
We Love Lucid, the travel company that you founded. Tell us more, I suppose, about having that idea and putting it into practice and how that went.
Yeah, so after my world trip, I went to rural Andalusia, which is in the south of Spain, and I did a workaway experience there. And workaway is when you offer your services, volunteering for a few hours a day, and you get accommodation and food. And it's a popular way to travel, and I've always really enjoyed it. And I ended up working in this hotel, doing a few hours a day, helping out, cleaning, whatever, helping with breakfast. And I met this guy, a Peruvian, half Italian guy, and we became really good friends. His name is Miguel. And one day he suggested to me, why don't you create travel experiences for sober people? And at the time, I remember thinking, oh, God, that just sounds so lame. I just could, because my perception of sobriety at that time, wasn't really perhaps a really positive one because I wasn't very long sober and I was still dealing with a lot of difficult emotions. And so in my mind, I imagined it as people sitting around in a circle, telling their woes and their stories about their terrible lives. But then over time, I started to get inspiration about what this actually could look out like. And I started to ask, well, how have my experiences of travel been as a sober person? They've been absolutely life changing. In Mongolia, backpacking in Siberia, swimming with sharks in Oman. Actually been really positive. And so, is there a way for me to share that kind of experience with other sober people? And that's how it all took off. And, it wasn't until I started running the trips that the most important aspect or the thing about these trips became apparent. And that was the connection. These trips are all about connecting with other sober people and people that have had a shared experience with you. I mean, there's nothing more valuable. I'm a single parent, and the other day I met another single mom on the beach, similar situation to me where there's no father involved out of his own choice. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, I feel really good chatting to this other single mom. And it made me realize I've only ever met in person. She was this only the second single mom in that scenario that I've ever met in person. My daughter's 4 years old. And I thought that is something that's really missing from my life. And it's a similar thing with sobriety. You can go online and on the Facebook groups and follow the Instagram accounts, but meeting up with other sober people in real life, there's really nothing that compares to that.
And you actually did a cycling challenge, didn't you? Beer to Soberton cycling challenge.
Oh, yeah. Well, I did. I tried to do that. That's a bit of a long story, but yeah, I did. So this is another lesson learned. And also it just goes to show that not all projects turn out well or plan, the way you want them to. But yeah, that was actually was a guy called Stu Nugent. He's a brilliant YouTuber, a sober YouTuber, and he's got a YouTube channel called Bat Country, and it's really, really popular and really creative guy. It was him. He came up with this idea. He was like, we got acquainted, and he had a really similar story to mine. He ended up in some prison in Kazakhstan, before he got sober and everything. Nightmare. And of course, I just thought that was a brilliant story. And yeah, we decided to do that together. Beer to Soberton, because he grew up down there somewhere. Beer is in Devon, Soberton is in Hampshire, and it's 120 miles. And he said, "Yeah, we'll do it in one day." And I was like, "Right." I hadn't ridden a bike since Korea. In fact, when I got sober, I rode along the east coast of Korea on my bike, and it was like a bike packing trip. And it was a big eye. It was actually one of the things that also inspired me to create We Love Lucid. This kind of sparked this sense of adventure in me. But anyway, I decided to do this project with Stu where we'd get a bunch of sober people, we get loads of people involved, and we'll cycle from Beer to Soberton, symbolic of the sober journey and all this kind of thing. And it turned out that Stu and I couldn't really see eye to eye, without getting the detail. We couldn't see eye to eye, and we ended up parting ways. And I was so stubborn about seeing this thing out, because I thought to myself, if I don't do it, that means I quit. I'm a quitter and I'm quitting at things. And I did see it out, and a pile of people, hardly anybody signed up. The people that did sign up, they all dropped out towards the end of it. But I was determined to not quit because that would mean I'm a quitter. And I was scared of that idea that I'm a quitter. And so I did it with two other girls, and we only got to 70 miles. And because our bike mechanic, he had to go home, and it was just a whole, I would say it was a bit of a failure, and just a real lesson for me. On the plus side of things, I didn't realize Devon was so beautiful, and Dorset, and the people down there are just so unbelievably friendly. So I got to see a really nice part of the country, and I had a really nice time with two of the girls. But yeah, just an example of a thing that didn't work out, and who knows if there were any positives to that. Sometimes we just don't know. Maybe there were.
You mentioned that you rode in South Korea as well on the East Coast, sort of on a bike packing trip. What was that like?
Wow, that was amazing. It's the first time I'd ever done anything like that. I didn't have the right bike. I was doing it on a hybrid bike. I didn't have the right gear. It's funny because Koreans, when they get into things, the first thing to do is go out and buy all the gear and the expensive gear as well. And I think they were looking at me. They probably just thought I was homeless. But I just got together whatever gear I had and the tent, kind of tied it to the back of the bike, and I set off, and Yeah, that was just an eye opener. Every day you wake up and you don't know what you're going to encounter. Now, I spoke Korean back then, and I still speak a little bit of Korean, but when I got sober, I learned Korean. And so I was able to speak to the villagers. And there's nothing more than I love when I go out on a wee bike ride is just to get chatting, stop off in a wee village, get chatting to the people. It just makes my day. And one of the things I love about traveling, even on this trip or the bike trip or any trips, is you really, you get reminded on a regular basis about the goodness of people and how that people are inherently good or have that side to them and will often, in most cases, help you. And now when you're sitting at home and you're not really getting out and about and doing anything, it's very easy to lose sight of that universal truth. And very easy to fall into this, oh, people are bad, everybody's bad. But really getting out and about actually proves the opposite. And anyway, so my trip to Korea, I cycled right up to the North Korean border, which was a highlight. Obviously, up there, there's a lot of military control. They've got these massive, big concrete barriers at the side of the roads, which, in case of tanks coming through from the north of Korea, they put down in front of the road. They're like tank. I can't remember the name of them, but I was just like, "Whoa, check this out!" On the way, some of the path, there was little fake soldier, like little huts with soldiers, looking out into the sea because the North Koreans also infiltrate South Korea, or they can, from the sea. So there was all these precautions. There was one time I was lying on a beach. Well, one time I was camping beside a beach. It was about 5 in the morning. And it was this off the beaten track place. A few other people camping there. And I was really hot in my tent, and I went out onto the beach at 5 in the morning. This is not something a Korean would do. That first of all, they would never camp alone. They always go around in groups. They're never alone. But they wouldn't just get out and lie on the beach in a sleeping bag at 5 in the morning. That would be seen as a weird thing to do. And anyway, I was doing that. Some guy came over. Yes, that's right. I heard a drone above my head. And now this was the time that people didn't have drones. Regular people didn't have drones. And I thought to myself, wow, I'm being watched because they think I'm there's a suspicious something or other lying on the beach here. And then I just pulled my sleeping bag over my head because I thought, oh, I'm sure it'll just go away. And then this man comes over to me and he asked me what I'm doing in Korean. And I just said, well, my tent is really hot. I'm just lying here. And anyway, he seemed kind of pleased, satisfied with that explanation. But, the funny thing is, I wasn't just about to go from a life of chaos and adventure and rampaging around the world to sitting in a cave meditating. Like, for me, there had to be that sense of adventure. It had to continue. And so this trip to Korea and visiting, going up near the border, and that was just like a big drama unfolding for me, really in line with my whole life. And yeah, so that was definitely a great trip. I've written about it in the past. I've written a few news articles about it in the past.
How has travel and adventure changed after having your own daughter?
Well, it stopped. Yeah, one of the hardest things was in the last few years has been feeling that like my world has been shrinking. Now, I mentioned before that I'm a single parent, but I don't co-parent. There's no other parent on the scene, and so there's a little bit of a difference. It just means that things like getting away for weekends and going away on adventures are, a very rare occurrence. And for me, I hadn't realized it was such a big part of my life. And so the 4 year mark or 3 year mark was coming up and I hadn't done anything like that. And it really did affect me mentally, not being able to do it. I remember having a conversation with a man in an airplane. I did the very British thing where I only started talking to him about 20 minutes before the flight landed, so I wouldn't have to chat to him the whole time. And it turned out he seemed like a very enlightened soul, you could say. And I remember saying to him, with I'd always imagined, or my life has always been so extraordinary, and I'd always imagined it to continue being extraordinary. And now I'm a single mom. I'm in Scotland. I'm struggling financially, and I can't get out and go anywhere. And I'm just over, and I'm not. My life seems just so normal. And he said to me, he said, I believe that all these extraordinary things are lined up for you, and that will be your experience. And perhaps, this is just a time that you have to be settled and not be moving around too much. Because let's be honest, taking a child, a 3-year old or younger on a trip is nothing but stress. That is not a holiday. Most single parents or people doing that on their own would agree. So it's only been this year that I've felt that I could go away with my daughter, and so here we are in Portugal, on this road trip, 1 to 2 month road trip, and yeah.
How's the road trip going? Have you hired a van or what's that looking like?
So I decided about 6 months. I thought, okay, because I've been trying to escape the UK. I've been like, don't want to live here. Winter sucks. Hate this place. And anytime I tried to go and live somewhere else, or I tried to feel it out, it just didn't feel right. And so I thought, right, for some reason, life is requiring me or asking of me to stay in the UK. And I don't know what that is, but I need to go with that. We're talking about the life force that creates the moon and the stars, and it's requiring me to stay in the UK. Who am I to say no? I'm going to go against that. So anyway, I've just recently started to accept that, and that's when I had this idea about going away with my daughter on a temporary basis. And also because I enjoy writing, I really wanted to get this blog of mine, Adventures of a Sober Single Mom. I wanted to get it up and going. I wanted to share my experience as a single parent who loves adventure and, the challenges of and the joys of being a single parent. And so yeah, I looked at my budget, what do I have right here? What can I afford? And I worked out that I could afford a micro camper, which is Peugeot Partner TP, and it's probably the most basic of all camping setups. And I got a thing called a boot jump, which somebody made for me, which is you put your seats down and it's this wooden structure that turns into a bed, and you've got drawers. You pull out the back that they turn. There's a drawer there for a stove and a drawer for dishes and all sorts of things. I got a box attached, a roof box attached to the top, and that's basically what we're doing right now. The camping is supposed to be a backup, to be honest with you. We're supposed to be doing workaways, but it hasn't really turned out like that. I'm really struggling to get a workaway volunteering experience with my daughter. So we've been camping for the most part. And, I always say that these kind of trips or trips in general are this condensed school of life because there's so many things that happen in such a short period. And I've already mentioned, my daughter's got bitten by a dog. There's a telephone pole fell on top of my car. My keys disintegrated in my hand the other day, and my phone is in the phone shop. There's so much stuff, so many challenges that you wouldn't usually have in such a short space. But there's also a lot of beauty and a lot of joy. I mean, I in the morning in the campsite, I wake up, I get out of the car, and I make a coffee and I sit, and the morning sun is shining down on my face, and my daughter is running around and playing with hopefully next time safer dogs, other children. And so, overall, it's the benefits really outweigh these challenges, but it's just a huge learning experience, is what it is.
There was a post I saw on your Instagram as well, which is a wonderful photo of about sort of a group of women on the Santiago de Compostela. And I'd love for you to share more about that trip that you arranged.
Yes, wow, that was unexpected. An unexpected experience, shall I say. A friend, Mandy Manners, who is a sober coach but doing other things right now, she contacted me probably 2 years ago by now, saying that she wanted to organize a fundraiser for the She Recovers Foundation, which is this brilliant initiative based in the US, but also working all over the world. She Recovers Foundation, and they help women through different forms of recovery, whether that's eating issues or alcohol or drugs or whatever. And yeah, so she said, I'm the one with the running the trips and sober trips in Spain, and they want to do this fundraiser. So we put together a trip, a challenge to do 1 week, 100 kilometers of the Camino de Santiago, and we did it in the part in Galicia, in the north of Spain, and it was a bunch of 12 sober women. Everyone had at least 1 year of sobriety under their belt, which is something that I ask now from now on. And it was just amazing, absolutely an unforgettable and life affirming experience. To be walking all day, to be sharing with the other women. The beautiful nature around there. It was actually just unbelievable. And I had actually planned to halt my trips for a while until I did that. And now I'm actually in the process of organizing another one for She Recovers, another fundraiser for next year, doing a different section of the Camino.
Oh, fantastic. And how can people connect with you? How can they follow along with your journey? How can they get involved with your future travel adventures that you're arranging?
Yeah, so you've got my website, which is welovelucid.com, and there you can find some of my what's going on, what trips I've got going on, and some of the stories that I've written about my before getting sober. You can email me there, and also I suppose what my main focus is right now is this trip that I'm on, and writing about it, and writing about being a single parent. There's so much stigma around it, and I felt totally disempowered at times being a single parent, and right now I feel like sharing and writing so that other single parents can also feel that sense of feel more empowered, really. So you can check me out on Substack at Adventures of a Sober Single Mum. I think you can also look up my name on the Substack too. It's Lauren Burnison. And yeah, I am on Instagram as well. We Love Lucid, although well, my phone's not working right now, and I have a funny phone which I programmed not to have social media on. So I'm not on there too much, to be honest with you. But yeah, if anybody feels like reaching out, please send me a little email. I'm always interested when people. I like to read people's emails about what they're up to and their sobriety and stuff like that.
Oh, Lauren, thank you so much for sharing that. I'll make sure I include all of those links to your Substack and to your website and your social media so that people can connect with you and find out more about We Love Lucid, the first UK's first alcohol-free travel company. But I'd love for you to share I suppose, your final words of advice, final words of wisdom for other women out there and you can take this in any direction, whether that's for advice for other single women who want to have more adventure in their life with children, or for women who are, maybe sober curious and want to travel and do adventures without alcohol. What advice would you like to share?
I'm not this person who's going to say everybody should become sober. There are people out there that feel like they want to moderate and everything, and that's great. I suppose my message would be for those who have, alcohol is really affecting their lives, and they really just cannot envisage or imagine a life without booze. That was me. I was the least likely person to be able to see this through whatsoever, but I've done it, and change is possible. And all of the things that I've achieved right now, including having my daughter, being on this trip, everything is because of that one decision to give it a go. There's this guy that I listened to. His name is Terence McKenna. He's passed away now. He was a big well, he let's just say talks about philosophy, and he talks about nature rewards courage, and I can't say that enough. And that applies to both sobriety and going on adventures. I mean, one of the things I love about these adventures is I'm roughing it right now. I really am. But you know how good that feels to get into a nice bed. For example, I'm here with my mum. She's over visiting, a nice bed in an apartment after camping for a week. There's literally there's no way to explain how good that feels. And just doing the hard things, yourself, Sarah, from all the hard things that you've done, how that just helps so much in life, makes life a little easier, and just builds resistance. Just try something hard, continuously try to include some hard things, adventures, pushing yourself out of that comfort zone. Although that's cliche, I can't stress how important that is.
Absolutely, absolutely. Lauren, thank you so much for coming on the Tough Girl podcast and sharing more about your story and your different adventures and travel and your stories of adventure and travel and how you're living your life at the moment. I really appreciate you sharing, and just best of luck with all the writing, the trips, and the future adventures that you get to go on with your daughter.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sarah. Really appreciate you having me on.
Hey, tribe, how are you all doing? I hope you're all keeping super well. It's Sarah, the host of the Tough Girl podcast, which I'm sure you know already. At the end of the Tough Girl podcast episodes, I like to have a little catch up with you all, just, fill you in on what's been going on, let you know about future episodes and what you can expect. Also give a little shout out to amazing patrons and supporters who support the work that I do to increase the amount of female role models in the media. So I'm just going to give you a heads up about our next episode, which we have coming out on the 9th of June. This is actually a Tough Girl podcast extra episode. We're going to be catching up with Jeanette McGill. She climbed Mount Everest at 52. She's going to be talking about leadership at altitude and the truth above 8,000 meters. So I'm just going to read the little spiel out about what you can expect from this episode. So Jeanette McGill is a seasoned mountaineer and executive leader who at 52 became the oldest South African woman to summit Everest in May 2025. With more than 30 years of global climbing experience, including leading expeditions across 4 continents, she knows deeply that the summit is never just about standing on top. Jeanette's journey is a testament to patience, resilience, and the quiet power of backing yourself, no matter how many setbacks you face. Beyond her personal achievements, she is passionate about demystifying the modern-day myths of Everest and advocates instead for the very real challenges mountain terrains face through climate change globally. Having been there herself, she brings an informed, honest perspective on what is truly happening above 8,000 meters. Today, Jeanette combines her love for high-altitude adventures with leadership on boards and helping others to explore their own limits. She also supports future generations through leadership snow camps in the Victorian Alps and mountaineering scholarships, believing that mountains are powerful teachers of courage and humility. Her story is not just about conquering peaks, but also about becoming the kind of person who dares to try. So we first spoke with Jeanette on the 7th of January 2021, where she shares more about being the first South African woman to summit Manaslu, the 8th highest mountain in the world. So new episodes of the Tough Girl podcast drop every Tuesday at 7 a.m. UK time. So make sure you do subscribe so that you never miss any of the inspiring journeys and incredible stories of tough women pushing boundaries. If you want to support the mission, the Tough Girl mission to increase the amount of female role models in the media in the world of adventure and physical challenges, you can support via Patreon, and you can make a real difference by signing up as a monthly or annual patron. And that web address is patreon.com/Tough Girl Podcast. You can also visit toughgirlchallenges.com, and there are links on there as well. I do understand times are really, really hard at the moment, so no stress if you're not in a financial position to be able to support financially. But I would love for you to tell one friend about the Tough Girl Podcast. If you've got a friend training for an Ironman, a running event, a 5K, half marathon, whatever it may be, share the Tough Girl podcast with them. If they've got an interest in mountaineering, swimming, sailing, there are so many women who've shared their stories on the Tough Girl podcast, and there will be an episode that they will benefit from listening to. There is a dedicated resources section on the website as well. And on the resources section, it is broken down into world travelers, sailors, wheelchair adventurers, adaptive athletes, mothers in pregnancy, Olympians and pro athletes, Guinness World Record holders, fighters, as well as specific challenges, for example, marathon des Sables or climbing Mount Everest or going up to the 7 summits. We've also spoken to a lot of thru-hikers as well, because I'm, very passionate about hiking, and I've done quite a few different hikes and adventures as well. I'm currently training for my next challenge, which is going to be the GR5, which is walking the length of Europe. So starting in Holland, the Hook of Holland, and I'm going to be walking all the way down to Nice. That is going to be my big epic challenge that I am taking on in 2026. I'm going to be sharing the training as well as the journey on my social media channels, which is mainly, to be honest, is Instagram at Tough Girl Challenges. So if you're not following along, come and give me a cheeky little follow. It'll be amazing to see you there. It's always amazing to hear from you. If you've got any thoughts, any feedback, if you want to get in contact with me, either send me a DM on Instagram or send me an email, sarah@toughgirlchallenges.com. I would love to connect with you. I'd love to hear from you. it's just amazing to hear about what other badass women are doing around the world, the adventures, the challenges that you're taking on, how you're pushing yourselves, how you are stepping outside your comfort zone. But all that's left for me to say is, wherever you are, whatever you are doing, give it your all, give it 110%, get after it, go for it, believe in yourself, because I believe in you. Take care, lots of love, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.